Welcome, everybody, to our ongoing series of community conversations with the Vermont Sierra Club. I'm Steve Crowley, and I'll be your host tonight. We are really lucky to have Tony Reddington with us tonight. Tony is a great long-term transportation advocate and planner in New Hampshire and Vermont. And he's been very active in Burlington for quite a few years now. And we are really lucky to have him in Burlington and to have him here tonight. So the way this will work is I think he'll be presenting some slides for the first, say, half hour or so, and then we'll switch over to Q&A or comments and your stories. And we welcome you to put those into the chat as we go along. And if Tony happens to see them, he might catch them as he goes, or we'll get to them later. Just want to let you know also that we are recording this. So if you're, if you don't want your face on the recorded screen, you might turn off your video, but we welcome you to have your video on and participate that way. And so with that, I'll just pass it off to Tony. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm going to go to share screen now and get going. And we'll try that. And we should be there. I'm going to move my, diminish my column of people there so I can see my own words. I guess first, I've had trouble figuring out just exactly where we are these days, and I'm keeping this local, looking at it from the standpoint of Burlington and urban areas, which would be our Rutlands and St. Johnsbury's and so forth, and taking that viewpoint. I apologize to the people who live in the countryside, but the real challenge for walking and biking is primarily in downtowns and village centers and urban areas like Burlington. There is a story to be made. There's an equally important role and issue for rural Vermont too. But basically, we're in the middle of a paradigm change, and that'll be my basic message today, is a paradigm change that is squeezing from the United States level and from the grassroots level, I say, into our public works departments and VTrans. And in Burlington, this has become particularly apparent. We experience here in Burlington 3 injuries weekly on our mostly, as our public works department chief tells us, 25-mile-an-hour streets. A death every 4 years. The 3 major conflicts right now are the $100 million Parkway, which cuts King Maple neighborhood of Color in 2. Not 1 inch of base route sidewalk on that project. Not 1 inch of separate safe bikeway, and jumps in climate change emissions. That project is now going into finally the U.S. District Court. The Main Street project has no safety, equity, or climate change emissions analyses, but it does have 4 of the 7 high crash intersections in the state, including the most dangerous, the highest crash intersection is number 1 is Main Street and South Winooski. 1 crash every 8 days. I guess you can just stand out there and watch. 1 injury every 7 weeks. And finally, which has been developed by myself and a couple of others following the Champlain Parkway examination of environmental justice, where we all had to learn what environmental justice was, what communities of color are, and what transportation, the transportation techniques that we've been using in the past, which are really systemic racism in transport. Anyway, 5 of the 6 west cross streets on North Street, which is the old Main Street of Burlington. 5 of the 6 west end cross streets are on the Vermont high crash list of 111. Those 5 cross streets intersections involve 1.6 crashes weekly, a tenth or 8/10 of an injury each intersection yearly, and over a decade, you're talking about 32 injuries and $4.3 million cost. This sort of gives you the picture of the areas that I'll be touching as we go along. A quote from Jane Jacobs, who I ran into this recently, is, "To understand cities, you have to get out and walk." And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think most of the people who are doing, I don't know if I dare say this, most of the people who are determining our transportation directions mostly drive cars and are unaware of the fact that people who walk really are the minority. They really are, the walking mode is really the apartheid mode of transportation. The bicyclists, cars, and even the transit people, who I love, get the advantage. In Burlington, our main street, which I've referred to, that 4 of the high crash intersections are on this street. This is perhaps the worst in the state for 7 intersections. We got just four of those intersections generate 78 injuries a decade, crash costs of 1.3 million a year. And it's right now 1 in 3 North End, downtown, and King Maple neighborhoods, 1 in 3 residents have no access to a car. This is, by the way, Representative Kowinski's and Representative Kurt McCormick's district, the representative area. So first, let me thank the Sierra Club. I have a chance to do this in person now for the Transportation Equity Day Award that we received with Vermont Racial Justice Association Alliance, led by Mark Hughes, for our joint efforts for a Champlain Rightway design to free now admitted King Maple neighborhood community of color of the blatant environmental injustice and low-income discrimination of the current parkway design, the current one that we're facing. After 3 years of delay, the Federal Highway Administration, VTrans, and the City of Burlington did not change a whisker of the design after applying the new environmental justice regulations. Now the parkway enters a stalled litigation at the U.S. District Court. We expect that will come alive sometime in May. The fatal flaws in the environmental justice regulations applied to the Champlain Parkway and the King Maple neighborhood remain a major element in the court case, and this is in addition to all the many flaws flowing from changed laws, regulations, policies since believe it or not, the last really overall public hearing on the parkway goes back to 2006. It's pretty picture time with Baptist Church in Manchester Center. This is a mini roundabout. There's no central island, and you can see vehicles going around. Mini roundabouts work within the existing right-of-way. You don't have to change the curbs. You basically plop them down, and they basically end up being sort of like putting in a round speed hump in the middle of the roadway, and cars go around in circles. There are small, as you can see here, a narrow median for pedestrians at the pedestrian crossing. So there's there's separation of the traffic. So this pedestrian only deals with traffic in one direction at a time. How did I become a walk safety advocate? I finally realized a lot of people said I use this all the time, that I'm a walk safety advocate, but I really started this about 1990. I was working for the Agency of Transportation. And one summer night, I was watching from 2 blocks away my kindergarten age son wait patiently with his bike as car after car whizzed by at the Main Street School crosswalk a block from our home until he was finally able to cross to the playground. At that time, traffic calming was unknown in the US transportation sector, and 20 million, believe it or not, there was only $20 million available for all walk and bike projects authorized under the federal transportation for the entire nation. And so that's that. I didn't know what a roundabout was or traffic calming, but I said, gee, I'm really concerned what's going to happen. What can we do to make it easier and safer for kids to get across the street as pedestrians? This is a intersection on North Street in Burlington. Nunion's, the Nunion's coffee shop is across in the colored building. And this is one of the high crash intersections in the state. This is North Champlain and North Street, where you have traffic basically going back and forth every day from the new North End. And it is an example of one of the 6 intersections on the West End that are high crash. There's a school, we'll talk about that a little later. And then as a result of my interest in safety and streets, I was a team leader in the effort for the first roundabout in the Northeast in 1995. Vermont as a leader, I was part of Vermont as a leader in the Northeast in roundabout development for really almost a decade, did research papers, and I began comments to Burlington on the Champlain fiasco in 2005. After a decade here now, I moved to Burlington in 2011, late 2011. I've had two near-death serious injury incidents as a pedestrian and a cyclist, both on the Valley of Death, South Winooski Avenue, aside the marketplace. I moved from the Old North End to downtown, and most days now from where I live in the center of downtown, I am traffic signal free in my life. I didn't realize what a relief it was not to have to deal with pushing a button and dodging traffic at a traffic light. I've learned since. So this whole paradigm change, and this will begin to get into the federal change, basically from an unsafety to a safe system approach, a safe system intersections approach. We've got to start to accept the fact we got a problem. And that is in the US, Vermont, and Burlington urban streets, we badly trail in safety for travel by vehicle and on foot. I want to defend safety for vehicles as much as I do safety of pedestrians. For somehow, again, 2 out of our 3 car injuries this week are going to be people who occupy cars in the city. So the US and the new US DOT Secretary Pete Buttigieg really has been saying this from day one when he was nominated in early last year. We have 21,000 US yearly excess road deaths. Those are deaths that are preventable through proper investment, proper enforcement, proper street designs, and so forth. It's a pandemic level. Ped deaths are up 46% since 2010. 2 of those deaths occurred here in Burlington. The Vermont yearly excess deaths is about 30 per year. Burlington streets are mostly 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. The notable exception is the marketplace. And our streets remain relatively unsafe for travel. Further, little has changed in the last decade, unfortunately. Our central neighborhoods, King, Maple, downtown, and Old North End, remain overburdened by high traffic and congestion. 11 of the 20 high crash intersections, the majority of them in the city, are in these 3 neighborhoods. Poisonous vehicle pollutants and climate change emissions, all users delay, blatant transport, systemic racism, and low-income injustice. The point is safety first, and that is the new thrust of the national US DOT National Roadway Safety strategy. So the paradigm shift really says we need to start addressing safety, and safety that in turn addresses low income and climate change, racial and low income and climate change. We need to align these policies we already have in place. We have a racism as a public health emergency policy from the City Council. We have climate change as a public health emergency from the City Council. And of course, we're talking here about the new National Roadway Safety Strategy as sort of coming to the fore in terms of the way we look at our core areas. Just point out again, finally, the Burlington-based yearly injury inventory. 150 injuries a year, 3 per week, 1,500 per decade. Pedestrian and bicyclist injuries about 50 a year, which is about 1 a week. And by the way, the bike and ped injuries in Burlington are about equal. So actually, bikes get overrepresented, I believe, in the ped numbers. Car occupant injuries about 100 per year or 2 per week. And in 23 years, and these are we need to emphasize here that it's the deaths and serious injuries that we should be first concerned about, not the total number of injuries. And the aim of the national strategy isn't necessarily to stop all injuries, but to stop the fatalities and the serious ones that cause obviously the most damage. So in Burlington in 23 years, we've had 7 fatalities connected with traffic signals. 3 of those are pedestrians, 3 are car occupants, and 1 is a cyclist. So let's talk a little bit about the A, B's, and C's of the transport challenge, because there's really three aspects. There's the A is a land use transport policy. The second is a transport roadway safety issue. And the third is the land use in regard to equity and climate change. They really are all involved here, and as many of you know. Getting back to land use transport policy, land use and transportation are linked like food and water. Everybody who, every family, consumers try to minimize their housing, transport, total cost in their household budget. If rents go up in Burlington, people move out to lower rent areas, but incur additional transportation costs. U.S. land use policy, as we know in Vermont, subsidizes both housing and transport, resulting in sprawl. Vermont has had a major thrust through Act 250 against sprawl. We compare the United States to Canada. Canada has no car subsidies because, well, they don't have a federal highway program. They have no home ownership tax subsidies for writing off your property tax and your mortgage interest. And the Canadians, when we got the 1973 oil crisis, they slapped $1 gas tax, and they use that for their general funds. They don't give 1 penny to the roads. So the density of Canada is about half again as ours here in the United States. Plus, obviously, with the more car travel, the more road deaths you have, the less walking, transit, and bicycling, the more climate heating. So we need to keep in mind that it's not just getting basically electric cars and transit. We also need to also look at the total subsidy picture of cars and home ownership to see where we can begin to ratchet that down a little bit to help the efforts to getting towards our climate change goals. Should the United States abolish the Federal Highway Administration? I don't think that's going to happen, but it certainly has their record on going from first to 18th in safety in all the last 30 years is, doesn't endear them near anybody in terms of safety. But it's one of the carbs. It's one of the car subsidies that exists. Act 250 did and does help. Note that John Ewing founded and led for a long time the Vermont Forum on Sprawl and kept that in the front of our minds when we were doing development. Okay, we talked about land use and transportation. Now let's talk about transport, roadway safety. Again, we used to be first in the US, we're at 18th now, with a pandemic level of 21,000 excess. And as Secretary Buttigieg says, preventable deaths per year. The number for Vermont, by the way, is we have 60 deaths a year, probably 30 of those are preventable. The problem is local public works, state transport agencies, and federal highway contribute to the dismal status with a few notable exceptions. We also might add, by the way, from an air pollution standpoint, that research done just released last year shows that Vermont has about 22 deaths yearly from long-term tailpipe emissions. This is new research. I was never aware of it. It's something to keep in mind. It's equal to about a third of our road deaths here. But and I think you can all can see that the people who are most affected by long-term tailpipe emissions are those living in our downtowns and village centers. Roundabouts, I'm known as Mr. Roundabout, but there really are no regrets safety investment that also positively affects climate change because of the reduction of about 20 to 30% of climate emissions, and roundabouts also work very well because they're higher. They have better pedestrian safety. They also work as a low income and racial equality investment. Roundabouts have been advocated for years by Geico. I guess I better respell that. AARP and AAA. They replace when they replace signals. You get about a 90% reduction in serious injuries and death. A quarter of road dead at intersections in the United States, half near an intersection. So, and seniors, poor people, and colored pets would disproportionately benefit. So As U.S. Department of Transport boss Pete Buttigieg from start challenged the death pandemic in his January released national strategy, he pushes to include threats. He's now pushing to include threats of funding cuts to attain change and traffic roundabouts as part of his challenge. I've been waiting for that, for him to say for a year the R word. It's finally happened. And finally, let's talk about equity and racial and low-income justice, something that I will admit I knew nothing about and had no exposure in transportation in 15 years in New Hampshire DOT and VTrans, other than, and I now look at this back with a embarrassment, that when the issue of applying environmental justice to roadway projects would come up, mostly there was just laughter because there was no requirements, no mandates behind that applying those rules. There are now mandates before that in regard to that. I am now a believer and understand how in transport policies and investments we have had built-in racial and systemic injustice. And I guess I look back, at least I finally have been enlightened. And so Pete Buttigieg's national roadway safety strategy, inclusion of equity and climate change, parallels Burlington's 2 city council policies of racism and climate change as a public health emergency. And it also fits in with the need to basically invest in our neighborhoods for safety. So safety, climate change, and equity are the 3 code words in the national strategy. I believe that's the thrust in Burlington now also. It needs we have the climate change, we have the racial issue aspects. We have not committed ourselves yet in Burlington to safety first, with one exception. So and of course in Vermont, you know more about this than I do in terms of how transport impacts on climate change. Would note one other item again, that 32% of the folks that live in these neighborhoods that we're talking about do not have access to a car. Status of the $100 million Champlain Parkway. Grassroots Pine Street Coalition, our lawsuit in 2019 to halt the $100 million parkway has now, after a 2.5-year delay in which the state, the city, and the feds applied new environmental justice regulations, but did not make a whisker of change in the design. Why so? It was did Federal Highway, City of Burlington, and VTrans think that they had already met all the requirements of new regulations? I don't. All I can say is that we'll find out an answer to that in the U.S. District Court. And by the way, there was a total error in those applications by saying there was no low-income people who lived in this King Maple neighborhood, even though Governor Scott designated this entire area of the parkway as a low-income area for purposes of getting write-offs in Trump's work opportunity zone regulations. Just a reminder, the Parkway base route includes not an inch of sidewalk, not an inch of separate safe bikeways, cuts King Maple, now admitted community of color, in 2, with 22 to 37% traffic increases in an already overburdened neighborhood. King Maple faces higher pedestrian crash rates, higher vehicle speeds, higher delay for all users, and higher pollutants and climate emissions versus best practices. Plus, many other laws, regulations, policies remain unaddressed. Many other design changes needed. We must go Pine Street and Vermont Racial Justice Alliance supported right way. A short map here showing basically North Avenue and North Street intersection here. The first cross intersection is 127, high crash intersection. Next intersection, cross roads intersection, North Champlain Street. I have a son who lives down here. And then we have the elementary school, and then we have Intervale, Elmwood. We don't know. We still don't know whether that's high crash or not, because it was not one that would qualify for being examined by in the state list. And then we have two other additional high crash intersections. This is the North Winooski North Street intersection, and just before you get to Pomeroy Park, the last of the five of the six intersections, North Union Street is also a high crash location. I'll skip that. Our city transportation plan is actually now almost 12 years old, and it obviously needs to be redone. But if you look at the section on safety, which is this is the, I think you can see this, I'm circling, is the one statement in regard to safety, in addition to economic health, physical health, choices for an aging population, environmental health, and so forth. But in being short, this safety statement is really significant. It says, safety is of critical importance, particularly where walkers and bikers interact with cars and trucks. This actually is a wonderful line, but in fact, our Department of Public Works has really never made safety the priority. And I think if they did in the case of the Champlain Parkway or the Main Street project, or and we hope, and hopefully they will, in the case of doing a study of safety on North Street, we might be getting in the direction I think we all need to go. A little bit on the new national safety strategy language. As I said, Burlington aligns with its emphasis of the public health is racism is public health public health issue, and the climate change is a public health issue. We align very closely with the national strategy that uses this strategy is really is a Vision Zero policy, and overall it's called Safe System Approach, and the intersections as safe system intersections. So safe system approach is the overall approach to investment and management of our roads, and safe system intersections obviously applies directly to the intersections. In addition to, we have the terms of equity and climate change that are two coincident policies that are part of the national strategy. And again, that parallels with policies of the city council. In last summer, our Burlington City Council did something unusual. They overruled the Department of Public Works recommendation for a signal at a high crash intersection, Colchester and East Avenues, and instead said that they wanted to install a safer roundabout if funds could be available. What's interesting about that decision is that this is at the Trinity campus, and that is where the University of Vermont is going to ask for changes in zoning so they can put in dormitories that would house several hundred students. So this was a prescient decision by the city council. But for the first time in my experience here in Burlington, that the Public Works had been told, no, safety first. This is the second Manchester Center roundabout picture. What this is actually a bridge about. This is built on top of an old arch stone bridge that goes across the Battenkill, and that bridge was taken down and reconstructed. Actually, just the rock, the blocks put it back in place, and is still there underneath the roadway. This used to be called Non-Malfunction Junction. This is looking from the North Shire Book Coffee area, and it is now called Function Junction. So what is the Vermont downtown intersection safety standards? We talked about all these intersections in Burlington, that 20 of them high crash that average 1.4 injuries a year. But what about the roundabouts? Why are they so good? Well, By chance, Vermont is one of the first to have a half century of data on 5 downtown roundabouts. The one in Montpelier, Middlebury, and Manchester Center. This is one of them that we just looked at. There are 3, including the mini roundabout. Per year, the Vermont downtown roundabouts recorded 0.08 car occupants injuries, 0.02 pedestrian injuries, and 0.0 bicycle injuries in 52 years. What this comes down to is basically our 5 downtown roundabouts are recording 1 injury a decade. Our high crash intersections in Burlington are averaging 1.4 injuries per year. I can't top that. This is another example on Pine Street. It was actually done by an AARP workshop. It shows a mini roundabout at Pine and Maple Streets, which is now an all-way stop. This is in the Champlain Parkway would be switched to a traffic signal. That would increase the delay for everybody versus the roundabout. It would increase speeds, obviously, for cars going through, and it would increase pedestrian injuries by 23%. It's a federal highway research number. So in regard to the North Street safety study, what the key elements would be: full public engagement, analytics detail each of the crash and injury impacts with a breakdown of overall and serious fatal injuries. Each mode, right now we have the total number of injuries and crashes and so forth, but it's not broken down by pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle. We would evaluate impacts on people of color and poor households. By the way, Burlington has 26% of its population below the poverty level, 29% in Winooski. The statewide and county levels are 10 to 12%. We're talking, and of course, again, 1 out of 3 do not have access to a car. I'll sort of skip that. Again, we know that mini roundabouts will work quite well. That's about all that will fit on the tight right-of-way requirements or conditions there on North Street. So we really can be spending $50,000 to $100,000, say, for a mini roundabout. So you get a quick payback, and it would be very affordable, so to speak, to do the North Street corridor. You don't have the cost of like the 7.77 million roundabout, which is the first one being built in Chittenden County on a public road, and will be open this summer. A good part of that has been costs of relocating and then redoing underground utilities. By the way, the Chauvin Street roundabout is 100% paid for by federal funds, because it was the second or third highest. It's off the list now, but it used to be about the second or third highest crash intersection in the state of Vermont. So I guess again, summarizing the new 2022 National Roadway Safety Strategy, and that you'll find if here's the I think you can get a copy of this that includes the address to get that report. It's very readable. Anyway, from the day one, we want to be dealing with beginning to reverse our current situation. We're in our number 18th in national highway safety and get back towards number 1. Ped deaths are a key part of that. And of course, we want to do that while addressing both climate change and equity. Another high crash intersection on North Street in Burlington. It's actually south North Winooski at North Street, and it looks like a very simple and not very complicated intersection, but it's still generating about an injury a year and several crashes. It's still a very high crash intersection. I've been asked to talk about what changes we need in law. There are 2 key changes we need we need one of these right away in order to gain our safety goals here in Vermont and nationally. We need to be able to reduce our hallowed 25-mile-an-hour minimum speed limit. That's the lowest a city or town can set by law. It's 25 miles an hour. We need to get that down to 20. at least 20, allow towns and cities to adopt a 20-mile-per-hour residential or mixed-use street street limit. Kurt McCormick, I know, tried to get 20 miles an hour approved by the legislature some years ago, at least for in front of schools and churches. That went nowhere. But the current 25 mile an hour is like the concrete of car-centric history. It should become just that history very shortly. The second, we need to adopt automated speed enforcement. So tickets can be issued to drivers going 2 to 3 miles an hour as opposed to the speed limit. This will be a considerable behavior change for Vermont drivers, but will enable us to move to another plateau closer to the top of the roost in international road safety and save many, many deaths and serious injuries. That this automated speed enforcement would be not only for be used at red light enforcement, but also would be portable mobile equipment that can be used from place to place on our street system. So if there's one message you get from tonight, it would be, let's get the speed limit, and let's let the towns and cities be able to establish a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. That we're going to have that done. Vermont Roundabouts, we have 16, and the Shelburne Street Roundabout in Burlington this summer will be the 17th. The Maple Tree Place Roundabout was built in 2002. That's the only other one. That's the only one that exists in Chittenden County. It was built on shopping center land, and it became Williston Public Street about 2015. The only 2-lane roundabout, the Keene Turn Roundabout, was one of the first interstate interchanges built in Vermont. It was the first in Vermont and one of the first east of Mississippi. It went from 55 injuries, including a fatality, in the 5 years prior as a signal to a 1 injury in the post 5-year period, a 98% drop in injuries. Ironically, the Keenetown Roundabout was built primarily to unlock development as signals could not handle traffic numbers, and Act 250 had blocked all development along Putney Road in Brattleboro. I think roundabouts are a measure of our safety performance. Chittenden County having really none on a public street right now compared to my hometown of 5 going on 7 in Keene, New Hampshire, is a reflection of relatively higher safety in Keene and lower safety in Burlington, Vermont. You can measure it as is shown here, either by per 1,000 population, 0.0 in Chittenden County. Burlington is right now 0.0. Our first roundabout will be open in July. Chittenden County 1 per 156,000. Vermont has actually 1 per 40,000 population. VTrans has 1 per 92. VTrans has built themselves 1 per 92,000 population. New Hampshire DOT is about 1 per 80,000 population. My hometown Keene is 1 per 5,400 population, with 2, I'm going to change that, 2 major roundabouts in development. I'll end with a picture of the first roundabout built north of Maryland and east of Vail, Colorado. Opened in 1995 on a dusky August night. The first 2 to use this roundabout were 2 basically 12 or 13-year-old bicyclists who went running around the hot blacktop with their bicycles. And then we have the contacts. I'll stop there, and hopefully I haven't put you all to sleep. And hopefully this information, just one thing to point out, I hope you will sign the petition. You can find that find that address at the website of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, and also the Safe Streets Burlington, which is our Pine Street. Our Pine Street website. Okay, Steve.
Great. Well, thanks so much. So much to think about there. You get so many little pieces going on for that. So everybody, go ahead and put your questions in the chat, or just raise your hand. There aren't that many of us here. I can't. I think I can see everybody. So just raise your hand. But I have a question. What would somebody do? Like if somebody lives in Burlington, how would they engage? Who would they engage with? Who would they talk to? Who would they bug constantly to make something happen?
Well, obviously there's two or three, at least three things going on at Three Ring Circus. One is a Main Street project that the Public Works is going around now to each of the neighborhood planning assemblies. The Champlain Parkway is basically now going to court, and it's a litigation process. But still, people could, if they go to, as I said, Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, sign the petition. There's, I think, over 600 have signed that petition so far. And in regard to the issue of North Street, that would be hopefully a study that would be spearheaded by the ward, basically the Old North End city councilors. And that would be Joe McGee is probably the key counselor to contact. You can find him at the city website, but urge him to seek to get that study authorized and the funding from the regional planning and city and from Public Works. Other than that, watch the papers and there's no, each of these, as I said, each of these is their own little realm right now.
Interesting. There's no one pathway through Public Works or City Council.
Well, I hesitate to, there are, it's obviously information on all of this at the Public Works, but most of what Public Works we're in opposition to. I say we, those who are involved in the Main Street project, the Champlain Parkway. The issue of the North Street safety study hasn't gotten to the Public Works yet. So I would say I would suggest talk to your city councilor on any of these issues. Obviously, in the case though of getting us a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and there's, by the way, there's been a lot of response to that in the discussions I've had. Talk to your state representative, because actually Gabrielle Stebbins, who represents the South End, is on the transportation committee, as is Kurt McCormick, Representative Kurt McCormick, and the only Chittenden County senator, believe it or not, on transportation is Tom Chittenden from South Burlington. They would be obviously key to getting a change in this direction. We cannot get safe streets as long as we're hamstrung by streets that have 25-mile-an-hour speed limits. Quebec, for example, theirs is 30 kilometers an hour, which is 18 miles an hour. That's their residential speeds and mixed street speeds that the municipality can actually lay on particular streets and locations. We cannot do Burlington. You can put up these little yellow signs that said it advise 15 miles an hour, but those have no legal significance. I shouldn't say that they're educational, put it that way. They have some value.
So I live not far from the south border of Burlington, and I can tell you one other little project that's going on is sponsored by the Regional Planning Commission, and they're doing a study of pedestrian safety, bike and pedestrian safety, pretty much along the southern border, Queen City Park Road and by the Barton Factory, and pretty much connecting Shelburne Road, one of the busiest streets in the whole state, to Oakledge Park and the beginning of the bike path.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, Steve. There's a couple of issues there. Number one, if the parkway is built, it will basically create a wall between, literally between the South End and Hannaford's and Mickey D's, yes, and so forth below. You will not be able to get by bicycle along Pine Street. You cannot get through. You would have to, I'm trying to think, the only way you could get to Mickey D's or that roadway down through South Burlington, you would have to go all the way over to, actually Oak Ledge Park and through the bike,
The bike path.
down to Austin Drive and then around.
Yep.
I'm assuming we're in winter now. There's a seasonal path between Home Avenue and the Queen City Park Road. That I suppose that could be plowed, but it's certainly not lit. It's certainly not a public way. Could be made so, I suppose. But basically, all pedestrian and bicycle connections to South Burlington are cut off by the Parkway.
We're aware of that. Yes.
We
Yeah.
Pine Street, of course, would put a roundabout right at the bottom and retain all connectivity that is there now.
Speaking of roundabouts, there is a question in chat from Tree. Tree, do you want to ask that? Are you still with us? Yeah, I see. Yes.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, to put those nice little roundabouts in on Pine Street, around Maple and King. How would they fit? Because the houses are right pretty much on the sidewalk there. I'm just not sure how that would work.
Well, if we take a look, if we can here, where's my? We could do a quick shared screen here. I gotta get out of this. So we can take a look at this. Okay, share screen. And can you give me allow me to do the share screen?
I think it should work.
Okay, I'm with my presentation, share, and then we'll go take a look at that intersection directly that we showed earlier with a roundabout at this is the current existing intersection with a mini roundabout at Pine Street and Maple Street. And if you sort of look at that, you see that really it doesn't, there's very little change in terms of space. But the largest possible vehicle, whether it's a tractor trailer or emergency vehicle, can make left and right-hand turns there without a problem. I note that there's 9,000 roundabouts in the United States and Canada, and it's actually a number I worked out on a public database last year. There is yet to be a pedestrian who's ever been killed on a marked crosswalk at a roundabout. Since roundabouts came, and again, 9,000 now in the United States and Canada. We've had 2 pedestrians killed on marked crosswalks on traffic signals in Burlington. But as you can see, that's the same intersection that's there now, but with a mini roundabout. It's in a mini roundabout, and if a vehicle can turn at an intersection, a mini roundabout doesn't change that situation at all. And again, if you look, there's no changes in the curbing, and that one of the beauties of the mini roundabout is that they don't cost much and they don't involve much construction. A lot of engineers don't like them because they think the minimalist still has the same safety record as a regular roundabout with a central island. But again, if you have room to have the central island, it's preferable to have the central island because it does conceivably does a better job of in terms of controlling speeds. But the safety record doesn't improve that much. That's what I'm trying to say. Does that help?
So it's really not that much better. I mean, it's not that much different from a 4-way stop.
You're correct. It's very much, it's a 4-way yield in a way rather than a 4-way stop. The real benefit is for the pedestrian, first, you don't have to stop. That's the first advantage of the mini over a 4-way stop. Therefore, you move more traffic. Actually, it was the Mythbusters who did a who showed that a four-way stop versus a roundabout, the roundabout had about a couple hundred more cars per hour that could go through. So there isn't, but you're right, there's not a lot of difference between the two other than the yield at entry. And for the pedestrian, it's much easier because the pedestrian doesn't have to look. For example, if the car is going to turn left from here, the pedestrian over here doesn't have to worry about it. The pedestrian knows that that car is going to have to come down and go around. So it's much less stressful on the pedestrian.
And it keeps emissions down because cars are just moving right on through as opposed to sitting in idle.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
I see Rob has his hand up here. I think he has a question about legislation.
Well, actually, it's a kind of a point of information is, Tony, you referenced legislation, and every year the Transportation Committee goes through what's known as a big transportation bill, which is primarily the budgetary. But unfortunately, they never dive down into policy considerations like you were proposing. I know there's a couple times Representative Kurt McCormick threw in language that you proposed or you talked to him about, and it hasn't gone anywhere. We've been told that things may be a little bit different this year, and that they are going to be working on some pedestrian issues in the House Transportation Committee related towards what's known as the miscellaneous DMV bill. So if that's an area people who are following this are interested in, please send me your contact, because we may be doing a little bit more targeted approach to that. But thanks, Tony, for this stuff. But I just wanted to flag that, even though this conversation is really not supposed to be about a political legislative solution right now, but I just wanted to let people know what's going on. So thanks.
So I wonder if people have questions about or their favorite roundabout or places where you think an intersection could be improved in other parts of the state. I see we have people from various locations here. Has anybody found a roundabout that has solved problems for them? Bud.
This is Bud over in Bradford. Hello, Tony. We have the intersection of Route 5 and 25, like parallel the Connecticut River, and it's the only traffic light, as I understand. It's the only traffic light in Orange County, and as I understand, at least some years ago, it had the greatest number of crashes, I should say, in Orange County. And it's a very big intersection, which would seem to me would be very easily turned into a roundabout. But some years back, I raised that at a town meeting, and of course, it's a state issue. State highways, you can't even, the town won't touch it. But I don't know. What would that take? Getting a bunch of people together to say, change it?
First, I was on the Transportation Advisory Committee in our regional planning in Washington County, central Vermont, for a decade. And the regional planning agencies do this. That's one of the things that they do is they look at the problem intersections and problems in the county, they don't care whether it's a state road or town road. So I would talk to your, and they have staff. So I'd call, you're probably what, northern, Northeast Kingdom Regional Planning, is that the?
NVDA?
Yeah. Orange, it's Orange and Windsor, it's
Orange Winds. Okay, so well, that's a pretty. By the way, that's a very strong commission. I would talk to them. They can tell you what they will. Their transportation should be more than willing. First, you probably have a town rep on that Transportation Advisory Council. I don't. So I would try to find out who that is, and then charge him or her to get that information for you as a resident from the regional planning. And they will, if this is a high crash intersection, they will find that out, and they can also find out how to, whether there really is a problem there. If there's not a problem, well, you're not going to get, you're going to be stuck. But if there's a problem with that intersection, then you can. It very, very well could be put on the development list for the county project, for the region projects. That would be the way I would go. And you should, but most important, you'll get an answer. You'll get some answers in that process. By the way, the latest 2 roundabouts were put in Windsor, actually in your area, in Heartland, I guess it's on Route 5 there, in White River Junction, at the bus terminal, and also the access road off that to Mickey D's. Those opened last May. Their latest 2, those were built in about 3 years. And apparently that was a high crash. They were paid for by 100% federal funds. So both those intersections definitely had a high number of history of a high number of crashes. So what you do is you try to, and this happened when we built our first roundabout, that each town had already told the regional planning what their difficult intersections were, or they were identified. And fortunately, the intersection that we put the roundabout in Montpelier that particular intersection was on the list. Had it not been, we might not have gotten city council approval. So you can ask your regional planning to develop a list of worst first intersections that need attention.
Thank you.
Great. I think we might have time for one more. Aaron has put a question in about the people learning how to use roundabouts. And boy, that I've traveled through that Winooski roundabout a few times myself, and that's a tough one because it's got multiple lanes squeezing into one, and it's and not everybody knows how to use it.
Steve, I've got to put that, and it's not in this particular, I will put it in this slideshow and send it to you, but I did not put in the difference between a roundabout and a rotary or circulatory road there in Winooski. You could take three of the new Shobin Road roundabouts here in Burlington, take 3 of them, throw them inside the traffic circle there in Winooski, and still have plenty of room. The problem that is actually that particular roundabout, or it's not a roundabout, we'll call it a traffic circle, is about 500 by 200, which is basically a 1/4 mile Thunder Road track. And so you're right. I have suggested that the way you solve that is you put a roundabout at the top, up at the top of that square, one at the bottom, and with obviously a connection, we call it a dog bone. And then you would actually take all that inside area right now in the Winooski traffic circle that nobody can access, turn out all to the outside, and it becomes available for basically park space, and for the businesses to be able to have their nice outside dining and so forth during the warm season. So
that's what it's designed like, but nobody can get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that the first roundabout in New York State was built to was basically to convert a traffic circle, a large traffic circle in Kingston, New York. And that was so. But I want to be a defender of traffic circles too. The one reason that the old rotaries are around parts of New England, including my home state of New Hampshire, is because their safety record, although it's not great, it's not as good as the roundabout. It's not as bad as some signals. So there's bad signals or get fixed first, and someday those, when you get down to the next level, some of those old traffic rotaries or traffic circles will get replaced.
I grew up in Massachusetts where rotaries were great sport.
Right.
Not always safe, but sport. Well, we are past our hour here. Tony, you want a last comment, or go right ahead?
No, I'm let somebody else, if they have a question or whatever, we can. Again, I think the 20 mile an hour, keep the mile. We need a 20 mile an hour speed limit to let towns do that. drop it from 25. Roundabouts are a measure of our progress. And we need to address safe streets, not just in Burlington, but also whether it's downtown Rutland or in Bennington or any of our urban areas. What we talked about here is equally applicable to those to other urban areas.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Tony. This has been really informative, and I learned a lot. I hope everybody here did. And as Rob pointed out earlier, he's going to be sending the slides out to everybody, and this has been recorded and it'll be posted on the Sierra Club website within a few days anyway. And Rob, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just threw in the chat on May 6th is the Vermont Walk Bike Summit in Middlebury. Yes. So there's a lot more conversations. So those of you who are interested in that, I just want to flag that. And then also, the Sierra Club ourselves, we're actively working on transportation solutions. It's been heavy on EV work because to reduce our carbon emissions, but we also need all these safety measures around bicycle and pedestrian access. So I applaud Tony for your work doing that. So if you want to help us get involved with that, we're always looking for more people. So come join us.
Great.
Email me at rob.kid@sierraclub.org, which actually, if you registered, I'll email everybody with the link and you can follow up with me there.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. See you soon, everybody. Enjoy the springtime. Happy St. Patrick's Day.